Welcome to Space Insiders. I'm Tony Sewell, and as usual, here with my brother from another mother, Rob Riak. Hey,
What is up,
Rob.
Tony? How you doing, man?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Doing great. Doing really, really well.
Yeah, what's been
Can't
going on this
complain.
week?
This week, just another week in the rat race, I
Yeah,
guess is the way to put it.
yep, in the trenches.
Always a lot of. I mean, the good news is there's always a lot of work to be had, so can't complain there.
Yeah,
Always learning. That's really the
that's
most
it.
important
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, look, speaking of learning, I'm really excited about our guest today. And it's kind of special for me too because our guest is a distinguished member of staff at Georgia Tech, and as a someone who lives in Atlanta and has family connections to Georgia Tech, and sort of sees the impact they have on the community down here, I'm pretty interested and excited about the discussion we had. We interviewed Dr. Jud Ready. Jud is the executive director of Georgia Tech Space Research Institute, which was started up at the start of July this year. Principal research engineer at GTRI, so think MIT Lincoln Labs, and adjunct professor at the Georgia Tech School of Material Sciences and Engineering. Really great, interesting discussion, Rob.
Yeah. You know what's kind of. I was thinking about this uh, recently. You know what's interesting about him is when you look at his background, and we talked a little bit about this, but his background is really in energy, nanomaterial
Yep.
applications, electronics, things like that. It's not just aerospace, right, or aerospace engineering or nautical engineering. It's a whole host of different areas,
Mm.
and he's got 16 patents and things like solar cells and. I don't know what carbon nanotubes are. Did we talk to him about that?
No, we should
But
ask him about that.
yeah, and something called metal colorization. I mean, he's got this whole variety of different in his expertise toolbox, and yet he's leading this whole initiative around space research. So it's really cool to see how all these disciplines come together into this market because I think most people think again space is satellites, you know
Yeah.
rockets and launch vehicles. So he is a very interesting person.
Yeah, and he goes into a bit of discussion on sort of the history of like why I guess how Georgia has been kind of involved in this space. How I mean Georgia Tech is really coming to prominence as a sort of national university, one of the
Hmm.
best technical universities in the country. It's been rated the last 2 years the best value public institution. For higher education in the country, which is pretty amazing. So, yeah, great interview. I think people are really going to enjoy it and hear how Georgia Tech is taking this leadership role in creating a space hub here in Georgia in the southeast.
Hmm. Yep.
All right, so going to the news, Rob. What's caught your eye this week?
um it was actually about a week ago. I read an article that NASA is expecting to spend up to like $1.5 billion to support at least two companies uh, with the purpose of demonstrating what they're calling crew-tended space stations.
Mm.
And these awards are going to be anywhere between 26 and 31, and they're going to be used. They're going to use Space Act agreements for all the design and development of these stations. So this is kind of interesting to me because, and again, I'm a little bit in and out of the discussions with some of the companies that have been focused on this, but there was a commercial commercial LEO destination contract, which was somewhat of the non-obvious name for developing a commercial space station, one or two with
Mm.
options that would replace the International Space Station because it's nearing its end of life, and it's been a discussion for years
Yeah.
by NASA to not only what would replace it, should it be replaced, how would you actually decommission and deorbit this thing when it's ready to be deorbited, and should NASA be the the operator and the developer, designer of the new station, or should it be an anchor tenant? And so, like a lot of
Mm.
these other efforts over the years that NASA's been focused on, such as the Commercial Lunar Payload Services contract, it's a very similar theme. NASA wants to take more of an anchor tenant role and make these more commercially based and focused.
Mm.
Um, so, what is different about this is that I think with the pressure, especially from those in other countries such as China, who already have a permanently crewed station, that I'm going to mispronounce it, the Taigong, I think it's called. Um, I think the administration realizes that if they were to award this contract to one particular awardee with the end to end solution for all problems or all opportunities in Leo, it may never get there, or it may just take a lot
Yeah.
longer than they think. So their idea here, if I understand it correctly, and there's a draft version of this, what they're calling a partnership proposal that's coming out, is that they want to more rapidly build a few of these with a few separate and different
Mm.
companies,
Bit of
and to do
competition.
these kind of 1 month human crewed missions to
Yeah.
do a lot of testing and evaluation. So I think it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know if
it.
people
Yeah.
expected that to happen,
Mm.
but I think they believe that's the most kind of plausible way of dealing with the situation.
That's pretty interesting. It makes me think a little bit about the discussion we had with Erica Wagner a few weeks ago. The term you said, anchor tenant, is that something that NASA is that a term they use? Because that's kind of an
Hmm.
interesting way of putting it. Like, and sort of makes you think about, like, obviously NASA is doing this to make sure they've got a government interest in making sure this happens, but it kind of makes you think, well, who could be other commercial tenants that think about creating a more enduring um, uh, position in space, I guess, in these stations in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you hear that term used for like shopping malls,
Yeah.
who are the anchor tenants.
Right.
But I remember I went to, this was a great symposium back in 2019. I went to the Werner von Braun Symposium, which was at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And I remember this, there was a panel that was actually talking about the CLIPS contract, that Commercial Lunar Payload Service contract. And they were talking about the ISS retirement as well. And, they used that term because they wanted, I think, to really deliver the message that NASA wants this to be. They want to create a LEO free market system
Mm.
somehow, some way, and they felt that the only way to do that is for the government to take a bunch of, take the onus upon itself to be kind of that initial and main funding mechanism
Yep.
or anchor tenant for
Yep.
some of these initiatives like the ISS and like the lunar transportation work, because NASA themselves have a lot of experimentation and research that they want to do on these systems. But they realize that, number one, they have the expertise. Number two, they have the funding to do it. Number three, I think, like we've been talking about for weeks and months here, is that the startup economy in space is burgeoning, but it's also not sufficient for a lot of companies, I think, to cross that chasm yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of the reasons why you hear that term. And it's not just this, it is a lot of other, kind of these, I think to most people, wild and almost seemingly impossible challenges to resolve,
Mm.
such as replacing a 25-year-old, commercial space station.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it certainly, from that discussion with Erica, it's got me a lot more interested in looking more into the commercial applications and who
Hmm.
are going to be some of the companies, the non-government entities that are going to be interested in taking up space and doing work there in these early stages. All right, just quickly before we get to the interview, World Satellite Business Week was on in Paris this week. Unfortunately, we didn't get to be there this year. It's always a
No.
fun week, but there
God,
was
I love that city, though.
it's
That's just
it's
so
such a
great.
nice time of year. I mean, talking to a
We had a
few
great time last year.
colleagues, we did. We
Yeah.
did. Um, but there were a couple of just sort of interesting little tidbits that came out, particularly around the launch area. There was a story published in Space News about one of the execs from Arianespace was talking about how they're really trying to, or focusing on increasing their rate of launches to beyond 10 per year, if government and commercial demand supports it. I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, you just look at what SpaceX has continued, like the rate at which they're continuing to launch. I think you posted another point in our notes here about they've launched 2,000 satellites this year, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, for a company like Arianespace, obviously the renewed interest in sovereign capability in Europe is something that's they're heavily government invested. So, I mean, that's going to be important to help them achieve that. But I don't know, 10 launches a year is kind of quaint with what SpaceX is doing, and Blue Origin's not far around the corner. And then sort of as a contrast to that, Astra were discussing how they're launching Rocket 4. I don't know. I need to talk to their marketing people about naming. But anyway, a larger rocket that they had some troubles in the last few years, but they're planning to launch to try and launch a new class of rocket middle of next year. And I don't know. It's interesting. Have these guys missed the boat? Or I mean, what do you think about like companies getting into the launch business at this point, and how do you differentiate against established players like SpaceX and Rocket Lab, who started in launch, but they've gone on to do much more than launch, and it's more than launch for them now, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're doing something right because they raised another $80 million, I think it was, in the last quarter or so. So, and I've met a lot of the folks like Chris Kemp at Astra, and I will tell you something: the talent at that place was incredible. I mean, and I'm not talking just engineering talent, just the leadership talent, and they also had they have a very unique, I think, culture to them. They're a Silicon Valley based, you know, story to everything they do. I mean, Chris Kemp is unapologetic about what it means to bring, the success of, the software industry out of Silicon Valley, bringing that to this industry. And he is, I think, when I've heard him speak and when I've talked to him, he is unapologetic about it, which I'd really admire, frankly. I think I you and I have talked about this. There is no final destination on what certain parts of this industry looks like, right?
Yeah.
There's still a lot of innovation around within launch vehicles. I think there's a significant amount of demand that it frankly just kind of continues to seemingly grow over time. I am interested to see, now again, we talk about this global rebalancing of defense and all these kinds of things, and the way the world is kind of moving towards more of a, I don't know if it's isolationist, but less collaborative in some ways, at least at the surface. That I think as Europe pumps a ton of more money into defense as well, that could be a big untapped market for a lot of these companies to also go after. So I don't really know. I think the market is unbounded still in a lot of ways. So I think starting a launch company is very difficult. The one thing you can't argue against is that there's no space market if you don't have launch. So
right, yeah,
if you can't service the launch, you can't service that part of the market, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, I guess I mean, and look at what Firefly's recent IPO. I mean,
exactly.
Clearly, the investment market thinks that there's value there.
And I also think I think there's also this diversification story for these launch markets that's making them more attractive. Like Astra's got this. What was it called again? It was a spacecraft engine, or the electric propulsion systems,
for
right?
Satellites. Yep.
So I think, and same with space, all of them. I think a diversified portfolio of assets that's trying to bring to market. It's not just launch anymore, right? Which it used to be with some of them. I think with the Ariane 6 one, it's interesting because Arianespace and ULA and these are legacy launchers that I think are, they are traditionally government contractors. They're told what to do. They have a set of requirements. They build to the demand that they know is in front of them because the government has to ask for it. And I think it's got to be really difficult. I don't really know, but it's got to be difficult for these organizations to start moving from I don't know, 5 launches a year to like 100. I
Oh
mean, how do
yeah,
you
yeah,
build a production capacity to do that?
totally. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so I think that's a challenge for those kind of larger legacy ones.
All right. Well, very good. Well, look, we've gone a little bit long with our news segment today, but some interesting stuff. So
Yep.
I think it's time to get to the interview, Rob.
Let's do it.
See you in a minute. All right, welcome back to the show. We've got a great guest with us today, Rob, Dr. Jud Ready, Executive Director of the Space Research Institute for Georgia Tech, which was just launched on the 1st of July. So, Jud, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Rob. Looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, good to see you, Jud.
I've been really excited about this interview, Jud. We met a few weeks ago at a gathering that a colleague of mine and I started in Atlanta to bring people together for the space industry, and we've had a lot of interest from Georgia Tech and GTRI, and I married into a Georgia Tech family, so I'm a long-suffering bunch of Yellow Jacket fans, so I kind of inherited that.
Can be a frustrating existence on certain playing fields, for sure.
That's what my father-in-law tells me every year when the football's on. But I do quite enjoy the basketball. But yeah, and look, having been in Atlanta for about 9 years now, Georgia Tech is such an amazing presence here, and really one of the leading engineering schools in the country. I think it was named the best value public university in the country last year, based on just outcomes, ROI for students, and in a time where education is getting more and more expensive, and people are questioning, should I be going to university? And like that's such a big achievement for Georgia Tech. So.
Yeah, and that Princeton review data that you're citing just came out again just like a week or so ago, and once again we're at the top there, as well as we're the only school that I know of, engineering school, that all of our engineering disciplines are in the top 10 of the national rankings. So very broad-based, high-level engineering institute of higher education.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, look, diving into it, you've had a really long and distinguished career with Georgia Tech. Your background is in material sciences. What's drawn you into the space sector, and why has Georgia Tech made this step of creating this new space research institute?
So space research at Georgia Tech has been going on for decades now. It's been bubbling up by individual researchers doing activities. More and more researchers start doing things. We created about a decade ago, Bobby Braun, who's now with Johns Hopkins, but was also chief scientist at NASA, created what was called CSTAR, Center for Space Technology and Research. And that helped coalesce the space research community. I myself, like you say, I'm a material scientist. So my research is on energy capture, storage, and delivery for aerospace applications, emphasis on the space part of that word. So energy capture like solar cells, energy storage like batteries or supercapacitors, energy delivery like lasers or cold cathodes, which are electron emitters. We use those for a variety of missions. And so it started out just as me doing individual principal investigator type work, began to build collaborations with other researchers on campus as well as off campus, collaborations with other institutions, other academic institutions, as well as industry. That's one thing that Georgia Tech is really proud of, is our engagement with industry, both small and large businesses. We like to think that we're very amenable to partnering with those types of folks. And so CSTAR just grew just natively, but the community got large enough that we were able to attract the attention of what we call the Hill. That's the upper administration. It's located on a hill here in Atlanta. And we have these things that are called interdisciplinary research institutes, which were invented at Georgia Tech. They're kind of horizontals that cut across the verticals of, say, the School of Material Science or School of Physics, to allow collaboration between different organizations on campus that are administratively difficult. Like, we want seed funds for both the College of Science and the College of Engineering. Which dean do you go to? Do you go to both deans? And so this allows very easy facilitates collaboration across all the different organizations, GTRI, what we call EI Squared, which is our Economic Innovation Institute. And so there was originally 12, some have merged and some have transitioned into different topics. But this July, Georgia Tech created 2 new IRIs. One is this one, the space one that we're going to talk about today, and the other is a neuroscience one led by my friend Chris Roselle. So that's how I got into it, is just doing small testing, component testing on the International Space Station. Then started doing CubeSats, and you know how careers go. One thing leads to another, and vectors lead upon vectors, and here we are.
Yeah, that's great, Jud. And the one thing about these horizontal programs, which I find really interesting, is I don't know if a lot of universities do that. They don't. Yeah, I was involved in one at Stanford years ago. It's called the Global Project Center, and it was just kind of a similar concept. And that was focused on smart cities, which is really interesting. And one of the things that they wanted to do was try to figure out how do you create these interdisciplinary projects, solicit funding internally for the students and researchers, and then maybe even invite companies in, like commercial companies in, to maybe even invest in and commercialize some of these things. Is that also what you guys do too?
Very much so. Yeah, the IRI concept was totally foreign a dozen years ago. We found that other schools have started replicating it. So IRIs here at Georgia Tech, in addition to the space and neuroscience that I mentioned, we've got ones on energy, ones on robotics, materials, electronics. Those actually merged to become matter and systems about a year and a half ago. A variety of different ones, renewable bio products, because the pulp and paper industry is very important to the state of Georgia. It's enabled collaborations, not just across campus, but it's kind of the front door for outside of Georgia Tech to come and, hey, we need an expert in topic X, orbital debris management. And so we can, instead of you just using Google and randomly coming across some people, you can come to us and we can make friendly introductions. And it just makes it for a much more effective way to reach out both inside Georgia Tech as well as outside Georgia Tech with all partners, industry, government, national labs as part of the government, but other academic institutions as well.
So what's your overall vision for it? So, what would you like to see happen? What impact would you like to see from this?
Well, the space community all along at Georgia Tech, just growing and growing, really wants to be the lead institution for a discovery class mission. Some very large missions. We've done plenty of CubeSat missions. We had a very exciting one that went to the moon, lunar flashlight. That's the model, 3D printed model of it back there on the corner. And that just whet our appetite for bigger and bolder missions, particularly the lunar. That's where Georgia Tech sees a lot of our activities going, is in the cislunar activities, both from a scientific perspective as well as a national security perspective. We've got close collaborations with Oak Ridge National Lab, for instance, up in Tennessee, and they're leading the space power for nuclear reactors. So we've seen a lot of uptick on those types of information in the press recently. So we expect to partner on big and bold missions. My vision is to be the first college to put a college student in orbit.
All right.
And not just like as a tourist. I want them like we're very big on undergraduate and graduate research here at Georgia Tech, not just classes, but actual hands-on doing stuff. So that's what I would see as a student up there working on it, hopefully writing a letter for the Technique. That's our student newspaper, maybe getting on your podcast as well.
Love it. That's awesome. So I'd love that you also mentioned the economic aspects from an interdisciplinary perspective, Jud. I think I've been involved in some of the entrepreneurial side sort of activities at Georgia Tech. I did some mentoring at ATDC. I mean, it's a great university supporting startups. Actually, one of our customer we work with, Kahan Space, actually, they came out of ATDC. So how do you see the opportunity that Georgia Tech brings as far as like supporting that whole startup ecosystem as well?
Georgia Tech has been supporting the startup ecosystem again for decades. ATDC, Advanced Technology Development Center, started in the 1980s, I believe, one of the oldest college affiliated incubators. And so it's grown. I've actually got 2 startup companies myself that have gone through ATDC. It's you don't have to be affiliated with Georgia Tech to do it. I think you might have to be in the state of Georgia, perhaps. But if you are at Georgia Tech, there's incentives that the Hill provides to us through what we call Create X. That's entrepreneurial support for student-based businesses. And then we've got Quadrant I, which is support for entrepreneurial faculty. And both of those can feed into ATDC companies. ATDC provides office space, provides mentorship of experienced people that have done these entrepreneurships and touched the hot stove and can keep people from touching the hot stove again, and provides other services, legal, accounting, things like that a nascent startup company just doesn't have to.
Yeah, it's a great program, and Rob, like that, they even just for I did a little bit of mentoring on the customer discovery stuff, because I did that when I did my MBA, and just folks coming in off the street with ideas, and they can access these resources for free, and as they get traction, potentially take up space in the facility. It's really great.
How do you get into it? Like if I am a founder of a startup, is there an application process? How does it work? Is it like a lot of these other, excuse me, accelerators, or how does it work?
There's several different tiers, so it's very easy to get in at the lowest level of tier. There's no cost. You fill out like a little form at atdc.org, and as you get more mature, as you go from just an idea to actual employees to actual, you've got a round of funding or something like that, you graduate through all the different levels, and as you go along, ATDC provides different amounts of support, whether it's office space or mentoring or whatever. It's it's evolved since the 1980s. I mean, that's half century ago pretty much. It's evolved to change, because the needs back in the 1980s of entrepreneurs are vastly different than what we've got going on today.
So that's actually a question that I wanted to ask you. So when you say that, what does that mean? And the reason why I think Tony and I are pretty interested in this kind of topic, which is especially this industry which I always think it's a revisited industry. It's not a new industry, right? But it's just kind of a revisited, different industry now, which is it's got a lot more commercial focus on it. There's more commercial opportunity for a whole myriad of reasons we've talked about in the past. But I think the other thing that's changed are the skills required to actually take advantage of and forward the technology in this industry. It's not just the engineer, I don't think, right? It's not just the hardware engineer anymore. So what are your thoughts, especially from where you are and your background? What do the opportunities look like for people with different skill sets? Data scientists, software engineers, hardware engineers. What is that? How are you seeing that, especially being at a university like Georgia Tech? I'm sure you see a whole myriad of different skills.
We do. We've got engineers. We've got an excellent business school here. We're partnered with Emory for our biomedical. We don't have a medical school. Emory's got a great medical school as well as a great law school. So we've partnered with them, which is really interesting because they're a private institution. Georgia Tech is state of Georgia, University System of Georgia Institute. So there's that public-private. But we actually share a library. Both of our libraries, we emptied out the books and put the books in an actual warehouse. And the library spaces have now converted to what they're needed to be, which are kind of communal gathering, studying together spaces. And if you want a book, you can just click on a website and it gets delivered within 24 hours, I believe is what they promise. I found it to be just within less than just a couple of hours. It's really, really pretty quick. Other resources that differ or that are beneficial or in kind of your day job with AWS, we'll have like credits, like ATDC can give credits. Neither one of my startups is really into the cloud computing aspect, so we haven't used that benefit, so I'm not as familiar on how that plays out. But the scale that Georgia Tech brings as the largest engineering school in the U.S., affords us expertise across all the domains.
Judd, zooming out a little bit. So, I mean, we've clearly established like Georgia Tech is in a great space here. What makes Atlanta and Georgia uniquely positioned, do you think, as a potential space player? Because part of the reason how we met is because of this happy hour we set up, because we realized like there's so many aerospace and space companies here that a lot of people don't actually realize that they're all sort of within miles of each other. So yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, aerospace is actually the state of Georgia's largest export. It's very heavy on the aero part rather than space. For instance, Gulfstream and Lockheed Martin selling airplanes. Those you only have to sell a few airplanes before that grows to a pretty
that adds
market.
up quickly.
But for the space aspect, if you think historically, Atlanta has always been a transportation hub. Back when we were called Terminus, name wasn't even Atlanta of the city. We were the end of a rail line way back in the 1800s.
I didn't know that.
It was named Terminus.
Terminus.
Interesting.
And eventually Atlanta became a major hub.
I like Atlanta better.
Of railroad activity. It does have a bit of a more less final type.
Is that when Latin died? Is that when Latin died? They decided to pick Atlanta.
Yeah. But the railroad was super important, and the Civil War occurred, and that's why Atlanta got attacked, is because it was crucial to logistics of moving troops and supplies around. And in a way, the burning of Atlanta really allowed us to create again and start again in the mid 1800s, whereas other places in Virginia or something like that go back to colonial times. And so Atlanta evolved after the railroads moved on, decided very early on in the aviation world, like in the 1920s, I think, something like that, started to build an airport. Now that's the world's largest airport, huge people mover, but also cargo mover. That's less recognized by even people in Atlanta, is how much cargo goes through. I mean, just many thousands of tons of asparagus and flowers and you name it, from all parts of the corners of the globe. I think
you should call the airport Terminus. Actually, I feel like every time I fly there, I never get out. It's like the worst airport ever.
Yes, I actually had to transfer planes in Atlanta one time coming from sometime, and I really had to focus not to just like get on the subway and go home.
Yeah,
that I had to stay in the airport because this concept of changing planes is very foreign to me in Atlanta, because we've got
we're so lucky
everywhere. Yeah, no, I know it's first world problems, I guess.
Yeah.
But why does Atlanta fit right? Well, first we got the transportation. Second, we've got the digital infrastructure. We're one of the first places that had fiber optics, again, back in the 1980s, right here, running up Interstate 75 between Georgia Tech and Oak Ridge National Lab. And we've continued to have just tremendous digital infrastructure. We've got an increased VC culture. Previously, the VC culture was not really here. Most of the investment was in real estate investment as opposed to technology. But that's transitioned easily within the past decade, maybe decade and a half. That's really picked up quite a bit to begin to rival, your Bostons and your Californias and stuff like that. A lot of people think that you need like a spaceport for doing space. So Florida, right? They're well known for that. But we've also got access to Alabama. Marshall Space Flight Center is just over the mountains. It's not too terrible to drive. I've been there plenty of times for collaborators and for working with that spacecraft. In fact, that's where we fueled it.
And the new site for the Space Force too, as of recent.
Yep. So partnering with our near neighbors, Alabama, Florida, are just natural fits for us. We had an opportunity to create a spaceport down on the Georgia coast, and I'm personally disappointed that fell apart. That opinion does not represent my employer, perhaps, employer being the state of Georgia, because I think that would have been a true benefit. But there was some local hostility to it. I get that. You don't want rockets flying over your house every day. But
because that was going to be sort of down near Savannah, right?
Yep, Camden County Spaceport. It would have been pretty good boost to that part of the state. That's a very rural part of the state. About all it's got going on is some agriculture and tourism with the beaches. This would have brought some really heavy industry there, but it is
What
what it
was
is.
the kind of the thought around like why that was such a what seeded that idea for a spaceport for Georgia?
That's actually the very old Morton Thiokol plant. It was actually considered during the Mercury days to be America's spaceport over Cape Canaveral. Eventually won out, obviously, but it had been considered for well over a half century. It's century, close to it.
Yeah, I find this interesting because when Tony told me about, I guess everything revolves around beer and social events typically. When he met you, and Tony living there for a long time, when he told me about this, I was kind of surprised, to be honest with you. I mean, I've heard of Georgia Tech obviously my whole life in terms of how strong a university is. There's a lot of people I hear in the DC area right now that are applying to Georgia Tech because I mean it's such an incredible place, and there's this new burst of interest in engineering, and obviously like you guys are top of the top. But in terms of space, I just never thought about Georgia being a hub. So what and it's kind of obvious to me now the way that you describe it. I mean, not only the fact that you have very strong universities there, but you have companies like the original Martin Marietta that became Lockheed, Lockheed Martin, then Lockheed Martin, and there's a lot of activity there still, obviously, very important activity. And then you have such close proximity geographically to a lot of other states that also have like very unique contributions to the industry. What do you think the state of Georgia could do going forward to kind of nurture all of that better? And do you think that there's maybe one or two disciplines that you might even predict that Georgia will be known for in terms of its contribution, not just for space, but is it material science? Is it your background? Is it something else? So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think the state is already taking those steps to raise the awareness through the University System of Georgia creating the Space Research Institute. These
Hmm.
are state funds that are going to support this, and that's a key part of what we plan to do is shout that Georgia Tech's great from space, from the rooftops, from the trees, anywhere to anybody that'll listen in terms of the benefits that we can bring from a workforce, from just a climate, it's a pleasant place to live, good schools, etc. Key benefits, I think, is a knowledgeable workforce. I mentioned earlier that aerospace is our biggest export. So we've got people that are
Hmm.
making airplanes. Just the natural evolution of technology. It's not going to happen next year, but we're going to be building increasingly complex airplanes that are going to turn into essentially spacecraft. But you look at a company like Hermeus, which is making hypersonic or trying to make hypersonic aircraft, passenger aircraft. So that's not quite space. I mean, it flies right at the edge of space, I guess, maybe slightly below
But
the carbon line.
hypersonics too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
hypersonics are big. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
In terms of what Georgia Tech brings, we've got um, several big bets on what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase the exposure of all of our students to have impactful learning. Georgia Tech has always had a kind of a dual mindset. If you go to the Hill, there's what we call Tech Tower. That was the original classroom building. It's now the administration building. And right next to it was a building called the Shop, uh, the old shop. It burned down 2 or 3 times along the way. But what students would do is in the morning, they would go to class, and in the afternoon, they would go to shop, which lab, it was some people would consider. But it's much more than lab. It was not just a lot of chemistry labs is that we know how many drops are going to titrate this beaker or something like that. The answers are no. And the way Georgia Tech approaches that now is allowing the students to explore unknown things. Undergraduate research. I've got on my board, because I forget how many I've got, over a dozen undergraduate students doing either sponsored research by external entities. For instance, DARPA. We're coding spacecraft with materials to improve their or reduce their drag in orbit. We are, I think, the AI world at Georgia Tech, due to that infrastructure, the computing infrastructure that we have, as well as the fiber optic infrastructure as well, gives us some significant advantages. And just the overall collaboration attitude among the faculty. When I talk to my friends from other schools and they're like, what's an IRI? I don't understand that. What? You've got friends in physics? How do you do that? It's not weird at all for us, but I understand that it actually is kind of odd at other institutions to have some sort of barriers. Georgia Tech's worked really hard at tearing those barriers down.
Super unique, I think. It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah. What about tech transfer? How successful has Georgia Tech been with that? And because one of the guests that we spoke to a couple of months ago, Brett Alexander, former exec at Firefly, amongst other places. As we were sort of talking, it sort of occurred to us that like 20 years ago, the careers in space were really only engineering. Whereas today, it's very entrepreneurial, and you obviously need the technical capabilities in your business, but you don't need to be an engineer or a PhD to be starting one of these businesses. And there's so much, obviously, all this research that's happening in organizations like Georgia Tech. So how successful has Georgia Tech been and continues to be in that space?
Yeah, we believe in getting the technology off of the shelves, the lab shelves here at Georgia Tech, and getting it onto the commercial shelves very strongly. If you look at the way Georgia Tech is created, you've got the basic, kind of curiosity-driven research that's traditionally performed in the academic labs. Then we've got GTRI, Georgia Tech Research Institute, which is very much an applied research institute, kind of like Lincoln Labs for people that are maybe more familiar with that name. And then, so that takes, TRL, technology readiness levels 1 through 3, maybe in academia, 3 through 6 or 7 or something like that at GTRI. And then we've got the incubator spaces, the ATDC that we talked about, Grade X and the Quad I, to take that to the next level, get it all the way up to TRL 9, get it out the door, and either form a small company that maybe gets gobbled up by a large company, or license the technology directly to a large company. We hired Mary maybe 5 years ago. She now oversees our office, we call it OTL, Office of Technology Licensing. They've really increased the staffing because it was terribly unfair to them beforehand to criticize them for not doing a great job licensing, because we're creating several hundred
volume
invention disclosures per year, right? You got 1 or 2 people there that are already have the ones from years before that they're trying to market. Now you got this pile coming up constantly on top. So we've done a good job hiring additional folks, because before it was basically up to us as researchers that we would supposedly know the market best, and if we found somebody to partner, then we could connect. Now we've got a good bit more support, and that's greatly appreciated for sure, so that we can do the science, because we're maybe not the best business development folks sometimes in connecting those dots. And it has helped increase our, I should have looked up the stats. Maybe we can find a way to insert this into the podcast, but there was an article just a week or so ago about the benefits of our commercialization that Mark Nolan is doing, in particular with corporations.
That'd be great if you could share that. That'd be super interesting.
Send it to you.
Yeah. And yes, are you seeing interest from the business school and in the programs in space as well?
Very much so. It's very much a broad-based effort. The Space Research Institute, obviously, engineering's huge at Georgia Tech, but we've got College of Sciences, which is physics or Earth and Atmospheric Sciences as well. The business school is tremendously interested. They had Alex Odell ran creative destruction lab space.
That's a really interesting program. Yeah.
And then also when you look at our believe it or not, Georgia Tech actually has some liberal arts as well. My good friend Lisa Yazak explores, for instance, science fiction. How is science, how is space portrayed in science fiction? And it's she had a great podcast with, I guess, your competitor, the BBC, just
Not
on
sure we're competing with the
Labor Day.
BBC.
I
Yes, we
know,
are,
right?
Tony. Yes, we are,
Just bringing
Tony.
you up,
Yeah.
bringing you up.
It's fake news versus the real thing. We're the real thing.
So
Sorry,
yeah,
Jud.
we cut across all disciplines.
The arts is actually that's really interesting too, because I mean the state has done such an amazing job attracting the entertainment industry. I mean Georgia is. I mean, it seems like every show I watch now, part of it has been filmed in Georgia.
But yeah,
So I think that connection to the arts and sci-fi, and it is a very interesting capability that Georgia has too, which overlays this for sure.
it is. It creates a well-rounded student, we believe, to have those uh, non-technical aspects involved in their education. I went to my son is a senior in high school, so we're exploring different colleges. So it's interesting to see the difference at some places. Like some engineering universities uh, don't require anything, no history, no English. And I was like, really?
I noticed that too. Yeah.
Because that was one of the, you mentioned the film and TV industry just exploding here in the state of Georgia. That was one of my favorite classes, was film appreciation. And I watch movies differently. I know the difference between diegetic and non-diegetic music, and really get a kick out of that. And I think my kids hate it when I, oh, look at the lighting and other sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a key area of emphasis here at Georgia Tech, is to ensure well-roundedness, both in their education from the discipline perspective, but also we very much want to get them out in the globe. We've got numerous internship programs with Europe and Asia and Central America, and just expose our students to everything, so that when they get out in the real world, it's not the first time they've seen it.
Yeah. Look, that's a great, the little tidbit about your interest in movies is a good segue. So we normally like to finish these interviews with a bit just a bit of a sort of non-space thing or a non-career fun sort of question. So are you a sci-fi fan?
My dad was particularly into sci-fi, so I remember reading a variety of his books. I didn't quite get into it as much. I do enjoy some Star Wars or Star Trek type movies and like that, so I consider that sci-fi for sure.
Are you a Trekkie or are you a Star Wars?
My dad was huge Trekkie, so but I grew up in Star Wars, right? I went to every single
it's a
day
generational thing.
for week on end. Me and Nick Davis would spend our $1.50 back then. If movies were pretty cheap, and we'd go watch Star Wars. And we even tried to make our own sequel to Star Wars with neighborhood kids and our little 8mm camera. We never made it to the Steven Spielberg level of production.
I'm deep in a new series that's come out. I really like the Alien series, and this new Alien Earth series on Hulu is it's amazing. So I don't know if
I haven't seen it yet. I want to see it.
Man, it is so good. It's not for the kids.
Yeah.
But it's really well done, because they're great series of movies.
There's a lot of good stuff out there, but I'm struggling to get into some of these. I can't even tell you the title. There was one, I think it was an Amazon Prime one, and I just could not. I can't even remember. I don't even know why I'm bringing it up, because I cannot remember the title of it. But it was so
great story, Rob.
painful. Yeah, it was just I just could not get into it. But I did watch recently. I was on a long flight, and I finally watched Dune. That is a wild. The first two, the new films. They're very long. I didn't think I would really like them, but they're just. I think there's the cinematography of them and everything is like super impressive. But that's something that I don't know if I really thought I would get into it, but those were legitimately very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll watch pretty much any space movie. Wife doesn't like me to watch them because I tend to start yelling at the TV when they get some sort of technical thing wrong. But
That is
but
pretty
I
annoying, Judd.
yeah, I can gloss over it. I'm like, all right, fine. They had to simplify it for the time frame within the movie. I get it. But they're all pretty good. My favorite's probably Apollo 13.
But
Oh
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's cool. That's a good
just
one.
it literally makes me cry every time. Tears of joy, right?
Yeah,
When they actually made it, it's like yes, even though you know the outcome, right? But
yeah.
every
it's
time it's good
unbelievable.
stuff.
Yeah, it's yeah. God bless Lovell. He was incredible. Just recently passed away, but
Yeah, he
I
did.
can't even imagine what went through their minds on that whole thing. But you know what? It takes special people to even go on that mission, even when it was
Problem solvers.
successful.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's
you got to be
just
a problem solver.
yeah, just extraordinary people. So
Well, Judd, thanks very much for joining us. It's a really interesting episode. I've been looking forward to doing this and talking a little bit more about Georgia and space. Um, if people want to learn more about SRI and Georgia Tech and you, where should they go?
We've got a super easy website. It's space.gatech.edu. It's
mm,
GATECH, georgiatech.edu. And maybe you can put that as a little
I
banner
will.
across
I'll
your
pop
thing.
that in the show notes. And look, Judd, thanks again for joining us.
Thank
Really
you, Tony.
great to meet with you.
Pleasure as well, Tony. Thank you, Rob.
thanks, Joe. It was great to meet you, and I love the shirt. For those that are listening, we got a awesome Hawaiian shirt. And why is that, Judd? Again, just so everyone knows that Georgia Tech's a fun place to be.
Yeah, it's Hawaiian Shirt Friday. That's it was actually
Nice.
mandated in some of our policies and procedures long ago. I went to look for it recently, and they've cleverly actually taken out that it's no longer kind of mandated over summer. But if you look around, there's a lot of Hawaiian shirts, and everybody kind of nods and winks at each other, and it makes you feel good wearing it. Makes others
It
around you feel
does.
good. So
It's
I
awesome.
encourage everybody on every Friday, and be sure to watch the movie Office Space as well because they're big fans
Yep.
of Hawaiian
Another one of my
shirts as
favorite
well.
movies.
Yep.
Yeah, I should have worn the flamingos today. I almost did. All
I'm glad
right.
you didn't, Tony.
Thank you guys. If you ever want to come back to Georgia Tech and talk some more about space, we are always here. We're looking forward to talking about this for years and decades to come. So we've got some exciting missions coming up, exciting events on campus every single month.
Yeah, great. Rob, when you get down here, maybe we can go out to Georgia Tech and film an episode
love
out
that.
there and meet some folks.
What'd be really cool is if we can talk to some students.
Absolutely, yeah.
That would
We
be
got a
kind of
few of
fun.
those.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope.
3,000. We're actually now the largest school
Holy
in the
cow.
university system of Georgia,
That's amazing.
primarily because of our online
Yeah.
masters in computer science. A lot of
Incredible.
those students, but
Wow.
still 20, 30,000 out the window here.
That's
Wow.
amazing. Awesome. All right. Well, look, thanks for listening. Thanks to our viewers and listeners. If you like what we're doing, please rate the podcast and write a review and send us an email too. We've got the website now, spaceinsiders.show. So check out some of our old episodes and blogs. And other than that, look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, everybody.